Welcome to Open Office Hours. Today we are joined with Dr. Keegan. Is your last name? Help me say your last name.
Ziemba.
Ziemba, terrific. And so we're going to be talking about exercise. And Dr. Keegan has done some work with Stacy Sims, who we talked about in membership before. And I'm really excited to meet with her because when I read Dr. Sims' book, I got kind of stuck in feeling like this was really for elite athletes. And I don't think of myself as an elite athlete, but I think there's still a lot we can learn from her. So I'm so excited to get some clarity on this issue from you. So take it away, and we're going to do this part for about 30 minutes, and then we will sign out of the recorded portion, and then we'll move over to Q&A, which will be recorded.
I love this topic. I want to empower every woman out there to understand that if you work out with intention, then you are an athlete. I don't care if you're competing or not, you are an athlete and you need to remember to treat yourself like one, which includes everything, nutrition, the training aspect, and the recovery aspect. So they're all really important, and they're just as important as we age to the spectrum. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to encompass today. I talked with Dr. Watson beforehand a little bit about like kind of age population. So I aimed this whole presentation kind of at the perimenopausal, menopausal age group, because it is different. It is very different. And do not let the social media, the TikToks, all of that convince you that you need to be doing what a 20-year-old is doing, because it is very different as our hormones change. So work it out. So with that caveat, let's talk a little bit about hormones. I'm going to leave that to the professional for most of the time. However, just to kind of explain why this is really important when you change the way you're working out and the way you're doing things. So as you enter towards menopause, you hit that perimenopause. And this is one many of us recognize pretty quickly, as things are not like they were when you were 10 years younger, right? Everything's changing. The biggest body composition changes actually come in the 3 to 4 years before you hit menopause. And it actually kind of stabilizes after that. And any changes after that point are not actually related to your hormones. They're related to the way you're living and the way you're doing things. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Insulin sensitivity drops it down. You get changes in bone architecture. So all this is really important, is all this is related to the change in estrogen and progesterone. So throughout that perimenopausal state, you have these huge fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone, leading right up to a flat line that happens when you hit that menopause state. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Why does that matter? Well, I'm sure you've heard lots of talk about estrogen, but I'm going to stress a couple of really important things, because that's going to streamline into the rest of the presentation. So key function of estradiol, which is the active estrogen that we want or have throughout our life up until that menopause point. So in the muscle, it's key for muscle protein synthesis. It is really hard to build it afterwards, and we're going to go into that. It is key for glucose regulation, how our mitochondria function, and how much muscle you're actually able to generate, or how much force contraction you can generate with that muscle. In the brain, it plays roles with serotonin, which is involved in mood, appetite regulation, thermoregulation, therefore leading to a lot of those hot flushes that we experience. Bone changes, big role for estrogen here. So helps regulate not only the cytokines around bone homeostasis, but also affecting how much calcium we absorb and how much calcium we excrete through our kidneys. And then metabolically, moderation of glucose regulation, insulin sensitivity affects these GLUT4 receptors, which are how glucose gets taken into a cell. Insulin is actually the one that helps bring that, or insulin, we think, has that role, but estrogen actually plays just as much of an important role, especially in the post-workout period. Appetite regulation, and then fuel mobilization. So as you're working out, as you're doing daily living, estrogen actually really is key in liberating those free fatty acids from adipose tissue. So that's really important, right? And that's one of the ways we are able to lose fat mass, if that's a key goal, is needing that estrogen around. Just a side note, I'm not going to go through hormonal therapy, but what I am going to tell you, it has not been shown in the literature to help stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So even if you are doing bioidentical hormones, this is kind of a key thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind. You still, even if you're on bioidentical, you still need to treat your body as if you're not in terms of exercise and fueling. So let's talk about training. Regardless of what age you are, there are differences between men and women. The literature is finally starting to show this a little bit more. There's finally more recognition, but it's got a long way to go. And the changes are from as soon as you hit puberty, right up and through we die. There are changes in the way we have all the receptors on our different muscles throughout our body, but in muscle, just for example, there are more estrogen receptors than there are for men. And so that plays a big role in how we can build and maintain muscle. So as we get older, we need to account for the loss of estrogen because with its anabolic stimulus, we tend to be more prone to fat accumulation. Remember, I said fat is mobilized by estrogen. May be taking in the same exact amount, but we're not getting rid of the same amount. So that's an important factor. So with training, your goal is neuromuscular stimulation and then maintenance of muscle integrity. Okay, so this requires kind of a holistic approach with Pylometrics, fast and strong contractions, and high intensity work. The long and slow, the endurance, the marathons, that doesn't cut it anymore once you hit this age. You can still do those things, but you have to do those things with incorporating in these other factors, which can be a hard change if you were, a lifelong runner and that's all you ever did, or for me, a lifelong cyclist, and that's what I'd like to do. But as you get into that age transition, it's like, oh, I got to relook at how I do things. And then the last thing I want to say is recovery. Recovery is just as important, if not more important, as you hit this age point. Women actually are slower to recover than men, especially when it comes to higher intensities. And that's frustrating. But as you get rid of estrogen acts as an antioxidant. So you tend to have more inflammation around. So recovery becomes just as important or more important as you age. So we'll talk about HIIT first. We hear about high intensity interval training all the time, right? But why is it important? Well, it's gaining greater and greater amounts of literature dedicated to it that's showing a lot of things. It can help us decrease the types of places we have fat. Visceral fat is the most cardiovascular compromising out there, and but also total body fat can decrease. Increases in VO2 max, so this is your exercise capacity. So the more in shape you get, the more this goes up, right? So that's really important because lifelong, we're seeing that this cardiovascular capacity is one of the key metrics for longer life. Overall, it will reduce cortisol levels. So in the short term, so like say you do a HIIT session and then you're like that night, your HRV is lower, your recovery score is lower. The trend overall though is up. And that's just because you need some acute recovery to help with that. You get better insulin sensitivity, better regulation of glucose. It helps increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which goes down, as I said earlier, when you lose estrogen. So this is really important. It can stimulate VEGF, which is improving your vascular health. So that's going to help with vasomotor symptoms. And it can stimulate growth hormone. So that helps increase testosterone. Women have lower amounts of testosterone at baseline than men, but we have even less when we have less estrogen around. And so that's kind of an important thing to help maintain that basal amount. And it can help counter estrone, which is an estrogen we don't want around, and cortisol. And so this can be applied to both cardiovascular type exercises that you're used to, biking, running, rowing, and resistance training using kettlebells and such. So we'll talk about some examples. The biggest thing you want to remember with HIIT is avoiding the gray zone. The gray zone is that kind of 70 to 90% max heart rate, which is actually where most of us do our training. I didn't want to admit it. I was like, nah, that's not me, right? Like I'm not in the moderate section, most of the time, except when I'm really trying, right? No, my heart rate says otherwise, totally. So I tried to chase my husband this weekend and my heart rate was maxed out. And I was like, no, that's not cool. The goal is to have a lot of time on the low end and then a little bit of time, 20% or so, up at the really upper end. So 90 to 100%. You can't talk, you can't sing, you're completely out of breath. That's 90 to 100%. And that's what you want, but only for a short amount of time. It sounds intimidating, but it's possible and you can work yourself up to it. So an example is taking 20 to 30 seconds all out, but then resting for 3 to 4 minutes. So if you're on the bike, you spin just as hard as you can for 20 seconds, but then you just la da da for 3 to 4 minutes. And then you repeat that 6 to 8 times. If you're new to it, once or twice, and then work yourself up, add 1 time each week. And do this a couple times a week. You don't need to do it more than 2 or 3 times a week, max. If you do it more than that, you're going to be harming yourself and not allowing for that recovery period. If you are an endurance athlete, then you may work yourself up to 90 seconds, where if you're in that kind of competitive level. For most of us, we're in that 20 to 30 second range with a long chunk of rest. And so this is kind of called sit rather than HIIT, which is actually been shown in postmenopausal women to have all of those benefits that I listed on the previous slide. Tabata is one that we hear ad nauseum, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. It's intense, it's hard, but let me tell you, it's effective in just 4 minutes. As you work up your capabilities, then you can rest for 4 minutes and repeat it again, and then rest for 4 minutes and repeat it again. And you can do it with so many different types of exercises. Yeah, you can do it with cycling, running, rowing, air bikes, but you can do things like burpees, kettlebell swings, anything that is getting your heart rate up, push-ups, all of those things. The goal is to add a warm-up before, a cool down after, and it should never be more than a 30-minute session. If you're going over that, I guarantee you're going to suffer from the recovery aspect. So it's short, it's sharp, it's intense, but it's over quickly. If you're looking to utilize weights, so you're looking for fast, explosive movements, you don't want to use like a really heavy weight. This is where we're going to be using lower weights. And this is the only time I advocate using lower weights. So examples, you can alternate the number of kettlebell thrusters and burpees that you do. You can do and decrease them over time and just do this straight set, 21, 21, 15, 15, 9, and 9. That's it. That's a HIIT session. You can do a 12-minute AMRAP, which means as many rounds as possible. You can do 25 kettlebell swings and then run or row or bike for 100 meters, or about 30 seconds to a minute. And then just repeat that and do that as many times as you can for 12 minutes. Do 7 rounds for time. So kettlebell swings, lunges, press ups, which are pressing it up. And you can do that for 7 rounds as quickly as you can. These are similar to kind of what you might see in a CrossFit workout, what they call the Metcons, but they're effective, they're short, they're sharp. And again, warm up, cool down, very important. All right, Pylometrics. So now Pylometrics are explosive power and speed, but you can do it with any type of thing. And you can do it, most of the time we say you can do it with jumping, but that jumping doesn't need to actually leave the ground. What you want is that explosive aspect. So even if your feet don't leave the ground, if you get into a squat and you stand up real fast, it's that explosion up that's creating the changes in force. So what this is going to help do is improve muscle power and composition. It's going to improve your mitochondria. You're going to get better glucose regulation because of the 2 above that. So examples would be any type of jumping, whether it's squat jumps, jumping jacks, box jumps, jumping lunges. If you're capable of doing that, go for it. Skipping counts, high knees, lateral jumps and skaters, burpees and tuck jumps, plyometric push-ups. If you have bands, you can use bands. So I some days, if I want more for the plyometric part of it, and I'm not like, I've done something else where I'm not trying to kill myself with plyometric push-ups, take a band, wrap it around your chest and have it to something up high. We have a bar that sticks out in our garage that I'm able to work it over. And then as you go down to the ground, the band's working against you and actually gives you a little bit of a boost to come up with the Pylometrics with the push-up. And so that's still Pylometric. I'm still getting that explosion, but I can do a few more than if I just try to do a straight Pylometric push-up. So that's another great way to kind of help give yourself a boost if you're starting from less activity. But again, a simple thing, if you can't fully jump off the ground, just get something that gives you that explosive movement. You can do these just a couple of times, a couple of circuits. So you could set it up and say maybe 30 seconds on, 30 seconds rest, 40 seconds on, 20 seconds rest. Any of those combinations will work, and just do it for a bunch of rounds that you feel comfortable with. If it's 3 rounds, great. Start somewhere, do something. Any amount of exercise, there is no minimum anymore. They say any amount of exercise is going to provide you immense benefits down the road. All right, so now lifting heavy stuff, resistance training, and there are so many benefits. I've listed a bunch here, but basically you're going to improve both the cross-sectional area of the muscle, so how big it grows, as well as its metabolic rate and efficiency, your own basal metabolic rate and efficiency, your strength, power, joint strength and stability, so bone mineral density, improved immune function. As you can divide it up: cardiovascular, neuromuscular, body composition, all of it. It's great benefits. It's huge. When you think about it, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the kind of talking about intermittent fasting, but all of these benefits that you get with resistance training are going to prolong your life. When you think about it, falls are a major cause of morbidity and mortality in older populations, both men and women, right? Why do you fall? You lose your balance. Why do you lose your balance? Because you lose your muscle strength. Okay, so that's something to kind of always keep in the back of your mind of why this is so important. Sarcopenia, I kind of think of as, which is low muscle mass, is kind of like the ultimate precipitator of disease and morbidity and mortality. So as you get into this perimenopausal, menopausal state, you want to think about dividing your workouts into patterns that are going to fit more with this new metabolic change that you're experiencing and hormonal change. So you're going to, instead of doing the typical 4 weeks with a week off, or 3 weeks with a week off, or even following your menstrual cycle, which is no longer regular at this point, you're going to just start training in these 2 weeks on, 1 week off type of situation. So 2 weeks that have 3 key sessions of resistance training, and 2 of those sessions are actually going to be in a row. And I know I've talked a lot about recovery, but the point of those 2 sessions in a row is that you create enough of a stimulus that your body's like, oh yeah, I got to build muscle now, because the estrogen's not there to say the same thing. The week of recovery is going to be just that. You're going to focus on just functional movements, your techniques. If you're learning to be in the gym, doing stuff with, say, a barbell, and you can always do it with the minimum number of weights, so that you're just focusing on the actual form. So say you've never done a deadlift before, and that sounds really intimidating, right? Well, you take some really light weights or a PVC pipe and you work on the actual form. And I always recommend, if you're new to anything like that, you work with a personal trainer for a little while so that you can learn the movements, but never be intimidated. I am seeing day after day. I just shared something with my family, I think this morning. There's a 90-year-old woman in Japan who's like kicking butt and taking names. She does everything. She's an in-class trainer. She does weights. She does all of these things, right? She's 90 years old. It's awesome. There was some woman that just broke a weightlifting record at 100. Okay. So it's never too late. And both of those women started doing their stuff when they were 60 or 70. So just FYI. So patterns you're going to follow: hard, easy, moderate, easy, moderate, easy. That sounds like a lot, right? So let's divide it up. This will make it a little easier to see. So say, for example, Monday, you have a real hard day, but still the hard day is only 45 minutes, right? It's going to be intense. It's going to be short, and you're going to allow for a lot of recovery. So you're going to warm up, do a little jog, and maybe do a couple warm-up sprints right at the end of that. And so when I say sprints, what's sprints for you? And remember, everybody's going to have a different baseline. So if you are not an athlete, but you're going to call yourself one after this presentation, you're going to do, something that's fast for you, just a warm up. And then you may do deadlifts, lunges, hip thrusts, and planks, okay? And just work through this. And all of your workouts are gonna be focused on weights that are hard after just 4 to 5 reps. If it's more than that, then you're not triggering a neuromuscular trigger, you're triggering just hypertrophy, which is not actually gonna give you that full range of benefits. So you really want to stay kind of at that lower end, and you're only going to do 3 to 5 sets. So 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets. If a weight is really easy, then move up in weight. Make sure your form doesn't suffer for it. Okay. And then don't feel that you need to do it. Okay, well, I hit that 5th rep, but I had nothing in the tank after that. You want to have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 reps in the tank when you do that. So what does that mean, right? So I decide I'm going to take and do a squat, but I'm going to hold the dumbbells over my shoulders like this. I'm going to squat down, right? And I'm holding, 10 pounds in each arm, and I'm squatting down, and I'm able to do 4. But then I'm like, I can do that 5th, but if I do that 5th, I'm done. So I'm just going to stop at 4. Okay. So it's just kind of gauging yourself, and then just kind of keep track week to week, just repeat week to week, and you see some progression. So after this day, you're going to follow it up with another hard day, but you're not going to work the same muscles. You're going to work a little bit different. So this first day was a little lower body. The second day was a little upper body, because you want to make sure you do work your full body. You don't just focus on legs. Don't just focus on arms. But after that, you can give yourself some rest. So work on mobility, yoga, Pilates. There is a website that I really like called The Ready State by Kelly Starrett. And so it's a membership program. It's I think like $10 a month. But it's worth it because he provides all of these mobility episodes that work on everything that you can think of, every joint in your body, things I didn't even know could move. He has challenges all the time and all that, but it's really great because, like, for someone like me who spent most of my life cycling, I have horrific mobility. If you ask me to straighten my legs, it's not going to happen. My hamstrings are so tight, right? So this is a great way to work on that, just a little bit, 5 to 10 minute chunks a day, or longer sessions if you want it. And then you might follow it up with a moderate day. So if a moderate day for you is that you can go for a brisk walk, and you can't sing, but you can still carry on a conversation, that's going to be the kind of the level that you're at. Okay. So we call that kind of zone 2 training. So you go for 30 minutes or so, moderate day. And then you may go for an easy walk. And then you're going to do another hard day. And so for an example, an every minute on the minute body weight circuit. And so this follows that pattern: hard, hard, easy, moderate, off, hard, off. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about yes, ma'am.
Sorry, the every minute on the minute body weight circuit, just to make sure that I'm clear, is that like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off? Is that how we're doing a minute?
No. So did I put it in there? I don't remember if I put it in there. So every minute on the minute is, say for example, it's 5 squats, and then alternate it with 5 push-ups. So at the start of minute 1, you're going to do 5 squats. And then whatever of that minute is left is just rest. So it may be 30 seconds, it may be 10 seconds, it may be 50 seconds. But you have that, you finish the number of reps within, and then whatever you have left over in that minute is your rest. So you have a little impetus to do it quickly, but also making sure you keep your form. So you would do 5 squats, whatever's left, and then minute 2 starts, you start your 5 push-ups, and then you alternate that. And you can do it with any number of things. There's lots of circuits out there. I probably could have filled this presentation with just examples of stuff, but I'll give you a little bit more than that. So heavy days, 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets. If you hit all your 5 reps, you have plenty in the tank, that's not heavy enough. So that's when you're going to go up in weight. That's going to create that neuromuscular, that anabolic stimulus to build muscle. And you are not going to get huge and bulky with this methodology, I promise. If you want svelte and lean, like our whole body image, social media stuff, this is the way to do it. And then make sure you're always taking enough time to rest. The goal of resistance training is not to tax your heart, it's just to tax your muscles. All right. So during deload, again, your goals are going to be focused around sleep and increasing your HRV if you track it, if you have an Oura ring or a Whoop or something like that. So your focus is going to be more on technique, mobility. You may do a moderate day. So pickups are where you, like, if you're spinning on a bike, you spin a little bit faster for, 10 or 20 seconds, and then you calm back down. Then you do it again, and just do it a couple of times. It's just pickups. Or if you're running, you go at a little bit faster pace, but not a sprint pace, just a little bit faster pace for a little bit while. But overall, you're going to focus on your mobility, your techniques, and taking it easy. And then after that week, you can go back and have 2 of the harder weeks, and you just build and you create these log blocks. All right, nutrition. There's a lot here. Because to do all this activity, you need to fuel for what you're doing. So energy availability. You may hear a lot about low energy availability. You may think, well, that only applies to athletes. That only applies to teen girls. That only applies to elite athletes. No way, ma'am. No way. If you are not maintaining at least 40 kilocalories per kilo of free fat mass, that's going to lead to hormonal disruption. And so that's not just your estrogen, progesterone type hormones. Think cortisol, think thyroid. So this affects you postmenopausal and premenopausal. What happens is your body thinks there's a stress reaction. You can leads to osteopenia, altered menstrual function if you're premenopause, depressed thyroid, elevated cortisol, and the like. So there is less research in the perimenopausal population to confirm this, but what has been shown shows flatline hormones, reduced resting metabolic rate. If you have a reduced resting metabolic rate, you're not going to be able to lose weight like you want to if that is your goal. The entire focus of nutrition is that you need to fuel your activity and fuel your training, because that is a stress to the body. Kisspeptin. Kisspeptin is a little peptide, meaning it's a mini protein that is involved in your hypothalamus, which is in your brain. And that is going to be the thing that gets downregulated, which downregulates the endocrine system, which decreases when you're in a caloric restriction. Okay. We have more receptors than men in our hypothalamus, and thus we're more sensitive. Most of the fasting research, all the fasting mimicking diets, the intermittent fasting, all of that has been done in non-exercising obese women and men. So if you are exercising and overweight, you still don't fit into those studies, right? So exercise provides all those benefits of intermittent fasting and more. So intermittent fasting is a stress. It's harder to maintain lean muscle mass when you are intermittent fasting. And that's because usually you're in more of a caloric restriction than you should be for the activity that you're doing. And in general, it triggers a sympathetic response in women, whereas it triggers a parasympathetic response in men. And that's regardless of whether you're overweight or underweight. That is the shift. Our bodies are not necessarily meant to fast like men were. And so for women, it can actually increase visceral fat rather than decrease it, because it's a catabolic state. So I'm going to drive home a point. I don't think intermittent fasting is wrong, but it's wrong if you don't do it with the right mindset around your exercise, because that's what's going to get you into trouble. So it can help decrease fat and lean mass, both fat and lean mass. And it can boost your mitochondria, lengthen your telomeres, improve insulin resistance. So can exercise, right? Exercise is going to decrease fat, and muscle actually tells fat to release free fatty acids. Kind of cool, huh? So muscle is beneficial. It increases your lean mass. It's going to improve your balance. So we talked about balance before, you know, falls, bad, balance, good. Boost mitochondria, lengthen telomeres, improve insulin resistance, can actually decrease appetite because it alters the leptin signaling. So that's really important too. So I don't want to say that intermittent fasting is bad across the board, but what I am going to say is that exercise has far greater benefits than intermittent fasting as a whole. And so if you're going to mix the two, you want to make sure, as we talk about in the next slides, that you fuel for what you're doing and fuel around your training so that your body perceives it as less of a stress. So in general for women, if you are active in any way, shape, or form, then you want to kind of follow just kind of general recommendations. And so these are all in kilograms, and I know we're in the United States, but the rest of the world works in kilograms. So carbs, 2 to 3.5 grams per kilo, protein, 2 to 2.5, fat, 1 to 1.5. So all of these recommendations are kind of based on your activity level. So I took a 65 kilo female here, and I just kind of did out the numbers for you. And so if you have an active recovery, which is either light activity or rest days, because rest is not a time to cut your calories way down, because that's the time your body's recovering. That's the time your body's rebuilding. It can't rebuild during exercise. Exercise is catabolic. It's what happens after the exercise that you allow it to build up. If you're doing moderate training, you might need to increase your carbs more. If you're doing any HIIT sessions, or if you're getting into that 60 minutes to 2 hour bike rides or whatever you're doing. And then heavy training, this is where you're going to be more of the endurance athlete or the like, or say, for example, my husband and I would go out for a morning bike ride, and then for the afternoon, we would go out paddling. And so those were days that was like, you gotta get the fuel in to keep going. So for example, if you, just to talk about the free fat mass, if you have a body weight of 65, oh, I didn't finish the calculation. Anyway, if you have a body weight of 65 and you're 25% body mass, then you have, this is your fat mass and this is your lean mass. And so this is the number that you would use to calculate your minimum caloric intake and your top end caloric intake. And this isn't to say that that's the minimum number of calories you need, because that's what you need to lie in bed all day and do nothing, okay? So you need more than that. You need to fuel yourself. If you're eating 1,500 calories, you're probably under eating. So what should you eat? Let's talk about that. Well, right off the bat, you want to fill at least half your plate with lots of fruits and vegetables. If you are in a time where you want to be on the lower carb side, because say you aren't exercising for a couple of days, and I'm not saying to go keto, I'm just saying that you're not having tons of carbs, then you may not have as much fruit as you otherwise would. But you still need to remember you do need some carbs. And so you're going to fill your plate, lots of fruits and vegetables. You're going to have some amount of protein, about a quarter of your plate. And again, you want to aim for that 2 grams per kilo for women, especially in peri and postmenopausal. It's a little less for premenopausal because we absorb protein better as we're younger. And then as we get older, we don't absorb the protein as well. So you have to eat more of it. And then whole grains, whether you are keto, paleo, or not gluten-free, or whatever it is, whatever fits into here, you want to pick whole grains, stuff that's not processed. Again, lots of fruits and vegetables. I can't emphasize those enough. Protein. That is the key for an equation of to signal muscle protein synthesis. Exercise is the other half of that equation. Arginine, which comes from protein, is going to be helpful for endothelial function. Lysine keeps arginine absorption in the plasma, so it's just as important. And then leucine. Leucine is the one you're going to hear about in branched chain amino acids that everybody says is really important for muscle protein synthesis. And the reason behind that is not actually that it's directing in the muscle, but it's actually affecting serotonin and tryptophan interactions in the brain and telling the brain that, hey, now we're going to stop this catabolic time. We need to be anabolic. It's time to build muscle. And so that actually triggers the cascade of signaling that triggers muscle protein synthesis. Again, you're aiming for 2 to 2.5 grams per kilo per day. So a workout dose, you want to get at least 40 grams worth of whey protein isolate, which is the equivalent of 6 grams of leucine in that. And so if you are doing, if you're doing dairy, whey protein is the best type of protein that you can take in that is bioavailable and it contains the right amount of leucine. If you are not doing dairy, and there are plenty of people that are not doing dairy, that's okay. There's lots of other sources, and we'll talk about some of those. So how can we get protein? Well, here's some great examples, right? So people are like, oh, well, I don't eat meat. Well, here's a whole bunch of ways that you can start to add it in. It's all about food combination. Don't think about it just as one item on your plate, like a slab of meat. You're thinking about, okay, well, I'm also having quinoa with this, and quinoa has 9 grams of protein, or I'm having legumes in a chili. So that's adding a bunch of protein, right? So you want to think holistically. Here's some higher protein, lower carb foods, meaning not that, again, not telling you to eat low carb, but rather just to make it simpler to add your math. So you can think about salmon, chicken, shrimp, peanuts, peanut butter, all sorts of nuts and seeds, cottage cheese, beef, eggs. All of these are great examples of high protein. Now let's talk about leucine. Here's ways to get leucine in. Okay, so these are a couple, just the last infographic that I would really say they really need to get in. Is there's different ways, but what you're gonna notice is that here up across the top are going to be your highest amounts. Okay, so salmon, tuna, pork, chicken, eggs are another one. Eggs belong up here. And then your plant-based proteins do have far less proteins or far less leucine. So you want to keep that in your mind, that as you build your meals, you're combining different proteins to give you that total amount. And then this was just talking about dividing your protein up throughout the day and just making sure around your fueling, you're hitting that 40 grams. Now, what if you're not exercising for a full hour, right? I know this is a common question, right? If you're only doing a 30-minute exercise, well, if it was HIIT, you need some carbs and some protein. A lot of times you can just use your next meal to refuel. So if you can time yourself, if you're working out first thing in the morning, you give yourself a little bit of food to get out of the catabolic state of being overnight fasted. Okay. Do not work out fasted. I don't have enough time to go into why. Do not work out fasted. Just a little bit. It doesn't need much, 50 to 100 calories of something to tell your body, okay, I can switch from catabolism to anabolic state. And then use your breakfast to refuel that protein. Same thing, work out just before lunch or just before dinner. You can use a meal to refuel. Just make sure that you have something in the tank before you go into it. So if you're working out first thing in the morning, break your fast before you work out, because otherwise your body stays in a catabolic state. Your cortisol gets really screwy, and that's not good. So even if you are intermittent fasting, break your fast. Plan your exercise when you're breaking your fast, or do your exercise in the afternoon during your feeding period, but do not work out fasted. So I think this goes on a little bit more.
Like
so
if you said, hey, Polly, you have to exercise, eat before you exercise, I'm going to think, I'm going to throw up. Like, so can you be like, I don't do well with that. So what small amount of food would you like? I've shifted to exercising in the afternoon. So I get through my work day. I haven't had anything to eat since lunch. It's now 4:30. I can exercise and then go home and eat dinner. But what would you feed me if I haven't eaten anything since 12 to 1?
So simple things, half a banana and some nut butter, half a banana and some protein powder, a hard-boiled egg, some nuts. I like RX bars or Lara bars are a great one that have minimal ingredients, all ingredients that you recognize, but that are easy to digest. If you can make a whole bunch of little energy bites and put them in the freezer, they're ready to go. Even a couple slices of deli meat, those are gonna all serve the purpose and not necessarily be hugely filling or highly caloric. I do like to do a little dark chocolate myself. It doesn't have protein though, so I technically shouldn't recommend that. But when I know I'm going to start my morning with a HIIT session, it's like one of the only things that I can convince myself to eat. So I do. It has carbs, so I'm okay with that, and I eat a ton of protein throughout the day. But if you have coconut water, so that's down here, coconut water and a little bit of protein powder, enough just to break you out of that catabolic state. And then I think I have post-workout ideas. Oh, it didn't change. I had time to prepare and not time to prepare. Sorry about that, guys. But regardless, you know, you can, if you have time to prepare, build a nice meal. If you don't, there's plenty of on-the-go options that you can either prepare ahead of time and grab and go, or just grab and go.
Perfect.
Yep.
So thank you so much. This was fabulous. Well, we're going to sign off, and then we can go to the unrecorded portion, and that way people will feel maybe more comfortable sharing.
All right, cool.
All right, terrific. I'll see you in a minute. Thanks.